Well, good morning and welcome to our daily word this morning. It is Tuesday, and I'm glad you could join me for our time together this morning as we continue our journey through the daily word. Today, daily word number 786, this rather long journey that we've been on together and continue to be on. Yep, I am up and moving today. A little slow, but no worse than I might have been, I suppose, from my little fall yesterday. So, anyways, you can see I'm at home just for this morning, finishing up a couple things I had on this computer, and then I'm going to head out in a little bit to get some other stuff done. So, thanks for joining me as always, for carving out time to be with me and sharing our lives together, for saying good morning. We are making good progress. Well, we are making progress on our metal shed project. None of us have put together a metal shed, and I hope none of us will ever again put together a metal shed. It is a challenge, but we are getting there, and it's going to serve them well in the future. So for this morning, I've chosen for our scripture Psalm 27, verses 4 through 5. And we hear these words. One thing I ask of the Lord, that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in God's temple. For God will not hide me in the shelter, for God will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of a tent. God will set me on a high rock. So this scripture this morning got me thinking about where we find God, where we find sanctuary, where we find God, where we do God's work, where it is that God dwells with us and we dwell with God. So, the psalmist, interestingly enough, says to us that God can be found in a tent, in a temple, in a church, out in the wilderness, all these places that God can be found. And so I got to thinking about all the places where we probably find God, even when we don't know it. So when I worked in ministry with the Ohio Conference of the United Church of Christ, my office was in Columbus, and I worked with churches in Ohio and Northern Kentucky and West Virginia. Some 450 some churches, and I was in well over half of them, preached probably in all of those that I was in. And every one of those churches were different. There were huge churches. I remember a church in Cleveland that was in its day, in its heyday, was a huge church, and it was filled with people. It was so big that it had a bowling alley. It was so big that, as a matter of fact, St. Paul's could fit inside of it. That's how big it was. The Sunday I was there, they were on their last legs. It was surrounded by a chain link fence because of the neighborhood it was in. And about 10 or 12 people were there that Sunday, and some of them still sat clear in the back because that's where they always sat. We had lunch afterwards. I remember it clearly. We had lunch afterwards. And even though there were only 15 people in this huge building, and they were going to close at some point, God's presence was so powerful in that place. It was an incredible gift. Others were very small and with heavy wooden doors and not many people as well. Others were medium sized and filled with people, and the list goes on and on. But in all of those places, we have found God in the midst of those places. We have been working on this shed project, which you know about, and I think Chuck and Lori were conspiring against me yesterday. And Chuck kicked out the ladder, and Lori took a picture. I think they're trying to get me to retire or something. I'm kidding, I think, Chuck. But it's in that place, where we work together and we make progress together, and we sit around the table for lunch that is prepared lovingly for us. It's in that place that we find God, in the midst of that place. I understand the challenge yesterday. People don't like me falling off the ladder and getting hurt, and you might have read a comment. I understand the person's sentiment. Jim, we need you not to do that. We need you to do God's work for us. But I replied, and I contend that what we're doing for this shed is indeed God's work. And we find God in that place. We seek the holy. We see the holy in that place. And the list for us goes on and on. So, where do we seek the holy in our lives? Are we in a huge cathedral? You know, one of my favorite places to go, I was reminded of it today, is the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. I know some of you have probably been there. What an amazing place that is. And you're just taken in awe by the builders and the construction and the tour that you get of that. I would love to go to church there someday. And even though that's a huge space, with a small group on a tour, you find the holiness of God in that place. We can look for God in those huge temples and cathedrals. We can look for God in the smallest of churches. We find God in the backyard, building a shed. We find God, I do, at the campground. Quiet, serene. We were there last weekend, and Diane hasn't been there a lot this summer, but we were sitting outside, and she said, "My goodness, it is so quiet." And I said, "Yeah, that's why I love it." And the sunsets there, because of where I am, is incredible. We see God there. We seek the holy. Wherever we go, wherever we are, wherever we might go, the presence of the living God is in all of those places. Now, it's tempting, to believe that the cloth has to be laid perfectly clear, that the candles are perfect, that our heart is swept clean, that our mind is a tidy dwelling place. We have to be just right with our tie on or our dresses on. We might think that. But God is ready to live with us wherever we are. In the tidiest places and in the crowded, most messed up places, God is ready to dwell with us. One thing I ask of the Lord, that will I seek after, to live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to acquire in God's temple. For God will hide me in the shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of a tent. God will set me high on a rock. Wow. That's just God meeting us right where we are and enriching our lives. So I hope today, wherever you are this morning at 10 o'clock, in your house, wherever you are, that you know that you are in the presence of the holy, and that we live our lives in all of those places, neat and tidy, and in all the places in between. So that's the word for today. I hope it's a good word for you today as we live our lives together. Thanks for joining me for our time together. Join me tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for our daily word on Wednesday as we share our lives together. So know of God's love that surrounds you. Know of my love for you. In spite of the fact that I'm not always the smartest, brightest bulb in the pack when I climb a ladder, although I was being very careful. Just know of my love for you, and I will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.